What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. I'm out here at wonderful Shenandoah National Park, and today I'm going to be testing out the Canon Powershot Pro1 camera. It's the only PowerShot Canon ever made with an L lens. I got this on eBay for 25 bucks, and I've given it a few test shots, so I know it actually works. I know it can take images, but now we're going to go out into the woods down to Rose River Waterfall and take some pictures, and let's see how it looks. I'm going to give it a good little test. Let's go and take a look. Well, we're not in Shenandoah National Park anymore, as you can tell. We're back in Virginia Beach. This is Pleasure House Point Nature Area. I had to come here. Wasn't able to get all I wanted to do at Shenandoah, but I'm here again with the Powershot Pro1. I'm going to run it through some tests. I'm going to test the macro modes, and I'm going to do a lot of other stuff. I'm hoping to see some ducks or something out here. Maybe I can get some pictures of those, see how it works for wildlife moving and otherwise. And I'm going to give it a run through, but I think the first thing right behind the camera over here, there's some flowers, so I think I'm going to go over there and test the macro modes, and let's give it a run through with the macro modes. So here I am using the macro mode. I have to admit it's very inconvenient because the view screen is so small that, and it keeps kicking me out of the macro mode, so that's annoying. But this is just the standard macro mode. 2-second timer. I'll take a couple here and then I'll go to the super macro. Now, I shot these at f3.2. Normally that would sound like a crazy thing to do, but because the camera sensor here is so small, I don't have the calculation right off the top of my head. That would be like f11, because f4 is an f16 equivalent on a full frame camera as far as depth of field. But let me go through the menus here. It's not easy to find the super macro setting. But you can get very, very close. So I'm about 4 inches away. They say you can get as close as an inch with this. Let me see. So as you can see here, I mean the flowers right here, it's maybe 2 inches in front of the lens. And I think that turned out quite well. So the macro mode does work. It's just a bit inconvenient to use it because of how small the LCD screen is, but yeah, it actually works nice. We'll take a look at the pictures here when I get back to the office and go from there. The major disadvantage with the super macro, which is what I'm using here to get so close, is that it only works recording in medium size or small size JPEGs. You can't do it with the raw or the large. So I'm not actually sure how it works, but you can't do the raw files. So that's actually going to be a bit inconvenient when I get back to the house. So I'll have to go over that. But other than that, let's take a walk around and see what else we can find out here. So obviously there are limitations to a camera that's now 17 years old, but I was trying to get some pictures of some bees back here on this tree that's behind me, and it's not working. It's not focusing on the bees. It's bouncing all around. It's not being good in focus. So that's certainly a limitation as far as shooting wildlife. I believe I got a picture over there of a nice egret, so I'll bring that back into the office and take a look at it. But as far as photographing wildlife that's sort of in motion the way these bees and stuff are, yeah, it's just not working. All right, so this is the last image that I'm going to take out here. It's one I wanted to take quite a while ago, really. You see my camera down there? There's some cactus there, some flowers, and we're going with it. I had to put the 10-second timer on because if I get too close to the camera, I'll actually hit, my shadow will be in the image, and I know from here it's not. So let me hit the button on that. Technical difficulties. I didn't actually change from the regular shutter to the other one, so I had to fumble around with it, wait for it to write, and then everything else. But anyway, that's that. That's the last image from out here at Pleasure House Point. Let's go back to the office and take a look. I have to say I'm actually pretty impressed with how well these images look from what I saw from when I was in Shenandoah, so I think I'm going to be pretty impressed with what I got out here too. So before we get into the actual pictures that I took, I want to go over a few of these specifications for the camera. Yes, I know it's a 17-year-old camera. This is it right here. I actually really like it. The images are quite nice. So made from 2004 to 2006. It's a 2/3 inch sensor camera, 8 megapixel sensor, and that's a 4 times crop factor. Now I know that doesn't really matter because it has everything printed on the lens and you just frame it up however you want, but the one place that the crop factor is going to make a big difference is with your aperture and your depth of field. So the 4x crop applies to not only focal length and effective focal length, but also to your depth of field. So f4 in this camera is going to be roughly equivalent to f16 in a full frame camera. f8 is going to be roughly equivalent to f32, and it doesn't go past f8. And f4, no, actually f3.5 is the lowest you can set the aperture and have it be constant. Anything below that is going to be variable depending on what focal length you're at. The shutter speeds run from 15 seconds up to 1/4000th of a second. However, the weird thing, and I didn't realize this until I read back through the manual, the shutter speed is variable just like the aperture. So depending what your aperture is, how wide your aperture is, the shutter speed can be different, and I'll show that in a graph right up here. ISO, you've only got 4 stops, 50, 100, 200, 400. They're all in full stops. We're going to go through it. I did tests at all those. At a normal viewing distance, ISO 400 looks okay. If you start zooming in, it sort of loses a lot of what it is. Variable aperture. Now this one we know because actually if you read the lens right there, you can see that it runs from 2.4 to 3.5 depending on what focal length you're at. And as best I can tell, it's at 2.4 at the lowest range, which is 7.2 millimeters, 28 millimeter equivalent. If you go anything over that, it goes to 2.8. And it looks like it stays at 2.8 until about 12.7 millimeters. That's 50 millimeter equivalent. Then it drops down to f3.2 up to 21.6 or 85 millimeter equivalent. And then it goes up to 3.5. That runs all the way up. Actually, no, that's not correct. I'm having trouble reading my own writing here. From 85 up to 200, you get 3.2. So I can turn that on. I've got it on aperture. So I'm all the way at 28. Anything you leave over, going past 50, it goes to 3.2. Going past 85, it goes to 3.5. And it stays at that. So, 28 millimeter equivalent, you have an f2.4. Up to 50 millimeter equivalent, you have 2.8. Up to 85 equivalent, to 3.2. And then above your 85 millimeter equivalent, it goes to f3.5. That's the max opening. It does have a continuous shooting mode where you just hold down the trigger. Normal continuous shooting is 1 frame a second. The continuous high speed is 2.5 frames a second, and you'll get 4 frames with that. And that's JPEG only. If you try to do it in RAW, it just goes to about 1 frame a second. I guess it can't write that fast. And so you get maybe 1.5 seconds of images, and then it starts being like about 1 every second. So if you're trying to shoot in a burst or something for sports, this is not going to work. It's just not. The macro modes, I talked some about this while I was out in the field. From the wide angle to 63 millimeter equivalent, you can focus from 3.9 inches out to 1.7 inches, and I don't have the metric in here for that. From 63 to 90 millimeters, you can go from 1 foot to 1 foot 7 inches, and at 90 millimeter plus, there is no macro mode. For the super macro, that's what I did, that can only record in the medium resolution, so about a 3 megapixel image, only from 42 to 90 millimeters, and you can focus anywhere from 1.2 inches up to 1 foot, so 1.25 inches. And that's from the front of the lens element. The manual mode, this is a quirk because you can see on the back there's no wheel. Normally with a Canon DSLR camera or mirrorless camera, you're used to having a wheel on the back that you spin. For aperture, this doesn't have it. So what you have to do is your wheel right here, you have to click it, and that toggles between aperture and shutter speed. Another thing that is manual only is the pop-up flash on the camera. So when you're in manual mode on this thing, it is completely manual. All the aperture, shutter speed, and the flash. And as best I can tell, there's only 3 flash settings. I did try to go in there. There's full power, and then what I would assume is 1/2 and 1/4 power, but I'm not sure because it's not listed. There's just like a bar graph, and you click it one direction and it goes down. It goes down 1/3 of the bar. Click it another one and it goes down another 1/3 of the bar. So that's what you have with flash. The autofocus system, which I had some problems with. It's not very intuitive to try to figure out how to get it to move, and just because the buttons are so small, even when you do, it's not all that easy. So I'll focus it on my screen. You can see the box right there in the middle. This button right here, the set button, that's what you have to press. You can see now it's green, and then you can move it across the screen with the button. Now, the difficulty with that is that this button is so small that you can't, it's not convenient to do that. I guess even though it does have the, the theoretical L lens on it, this is a camera that's meant for, the average user. It's probably not meant for somebody who's really trying to have a lot of control over where their autofocus point's going. But it does have that. It does not give full coverage of the frame. You could see that it was stopping. It's probably 3/4 of the frame. Another thing, if you're trying to use it, the default, if this screen is open, even when it's like this, is that you're using the LCD screen. In order to actually switch and go to the live view, you have to press this button right over here. And now it's off and you're in live view. Or the electronic viewfinder is what I mean. The electronic viewfinder is actually not bad. I'm sure it's nothing compared to, what we have now, but it's not terrible. It will definitely get the job done. It'll tell you if you're overexposed. I shot pretty much everything in the aperture priority mode. I don't shoot very much in manual. I just, the meter is going to tell me the same thing. This is not a camera that I'm going to try to do any exposure compensation on, where I would try to use manual and overexpose, underexpose by 2 stops or whatever. Not going to do that here. And so the final thing is video. Oh boy, video. You saw the video clip that I put in. That was the best quality that this camera can record, and yeah, it's not good. It's just not good. I actually asked a question on a forum that, just because something's missing, because if we go to the store and buy a DVD and we put it on our TV set, or I can put it on this computer here and I can blow that up the whole screen and it's going to have great video. Well, DVD video is 480 pixels tall by 720 pixels wide. This video is 480 by 640, and the video that's coming out of this camera looks like something that was recorded on a VHS tape on the EP, the ultra long mode, and then stored in somebody's attic for 20 years. It's just not good. It's really bad. In the manual, it says that on the 640 by 480 setting, you get 30 seconds worth of video. I did test that. That is what you get. I had the first video cut off on me and I didn't realize it. At the 320 by 240 and the 160 by 120 settings, it'll go for 3 minutes. So I don't know why anybody would be trying to buy this camera as a vlogging camera, but if that was anything you've thought about, this is not for you. 30 seconds worth of video, and it's very, very, very poor quality. And it also only records at 15 frames per second, which is less frames per second than what an old 8mm camcorder used to record at, because those would record at 18. So not very many frames per second, very, very poor quality. And as far as I can tell, and I read through the manual several times, there is no option to control anything with the video. You can't control the shutter speed, you can't control the ISO, nothing, and you can't control the video. And that's why on some of the videos that I tried to record, I couldn't use them because there was so much background noise, and so there's no way to turn down like the gain or anything on it. And there's only so much you can do in post-processing software. So again, while this camera does have video features, this is definitely not a camera for video. Now, so having gone through all those specs, really this is a nice camera. I got it for $25 plus shipping, and the images are really nice. I mean, this is one of the images right here. I did some edits to this one, but yeah, these are really nice images, and this is definitely a camera, and I'm sure most of the Powershots are. Definitely a camera you could take out hiking, as long as you're not trying to shoot wildlife or something like that. If you're shooting wildlife, this is not for you. It doesn't have enough frames, especially if you're trying to shoot running wildlife, and the autofocus is not all that great. But all total, for just general daily shooting and that sort of thing, this is a really fantastic camera. And with that, let's go into Photoshop and take a look at some of the raw files.
All right, so now that we've heard all the specs for the camera, let's take a look at some of these images. So this is the first one. You can see down here, this is the one I shot at ISO 50. I wanted to see what the base ISO looked like. And you'll forgive me if I'm a little cumbersome with Lightroom. I never actually use Lightroom. I always use Photoshop for everything. So I'm kind of learning as I go with this thing. It's just this is much more convenient to actually get all the images. But I'm scrolling around the image because I want to see how the noise looks. I think it looks really nice right here in the center of the frame. Obviously, everything should look nice in the center. Let's take a look up here. That looks pretty solid, pretty sharp. I shot these at, these were shot at f4. I left them all at f4. f4 is pretty much the middle of the range for this camera because it only goes up to f8, like I talked about with the things. So this is ISO 50, and I'm going to show some of these images at the end that I went through and actually edited. This is completely unedited. There's no edits done here. If we want to see some edits, we can raise the temperature. Don't want to go quite that high. About 10,000. Yeah, I like that. Anyway, let's go to the next one. And this is ISO 100. It's coming up. I still think that's nice and usable. You can look over here. Not bad. Still nice and fairly sharp for a 17-year-old camera with an 8-megapixel sensor. Let's be fair. You shouldn't really compare something like this to some new R5 or something like that. It's just not a fair comparison. So let's take a look at 200. Starting to see some more noise in here, but you know, you're looking at a really substantial crop. So, you know, looking at it right here, I don't know if I could tell a difference between this image and, well, I can tell a difference there because I changed the color, didn't I? But as far as the texture of the image and the noise, you know, I can't tell a difference. Now here, yeah, we can start to see a lot of difference here. So I think ISO 400 is really the setting you want to steer clear of, but 50, 100, and 200, you know, I think those are quite fine. If you had to use this, you know, it wouldn't be that big of a deal, but it's probably not the ideal thing. This is ISO 50. This is the main Rose River waterfall. It's 50 or 60 feet tall. Again, I did a full edit of this one that I'll show at the very end of this video. Let's take a look right here. Looks nice. Looks nice up here. One thing I noticed, which is apparently an issue with this camera. Let me zoom in a little more. You can see the purple banding here. That's apparently an issue that this camera was known for. Let's take a look at ISO 100. I want to zoom out a little bit off of that. Don't want it quite so zoomed in. Let's zoom in just a little more and see how it looks. I think that looks very nice at ISO 100. Let's go up to 200. Still, we look down here. It actually looks, oddly enough, like this is being reduced as we're going up in the ISO values. And then right here, and that still looks good even at 200. Now this is the 400, and that, when you're zoomed in, that's starting to not look as good. But oddly enough, this one looks far better than the one before it. Let's take a quick look at this one here. I just did this one because I liked how the moon was setting up here, but since I've got it here, let's take a look. Pretty much no detail on the moon. Honestly, that's not all that surprising. Again, this is an 8 megapixel sensor, small sensor, but you know, overall, this is definitely a usable image, even if it's maybe not a great one. So this is the first of the macro images you saw me take. This is the one obviously more zoomed out. And I thought this right here was an issue with the camera when I saw it in this image. Now right here, it's very, very visible. And I thought it was an issue with the camera, but now I'm not sure it is, since it's in the same place on every flower. I thought maybe it was a scratch on my lens that was showing up, but I don't think that's the case. So this is the normal macro mode. This is the regular macro mode. But, you know, closer, let's look. I mean, that is really solid detail in the image. Now this one, I don't think it missed focus. I think what happened here is that it was moving a little bit, and this was at a 60th of a second. I just don't think that was enough to stop the motion. But, you know, for this one, you could see the camera was, 2 inches away. This is one of the ones I was talking about as far as the B. So that's supposed to be a B right there, but you can see the camera decided it was going to focus, you know, somewhere back here, even though the focusing box was clearly right here. It somehow picked up on the branch or something all the way in the back. So that was very inconvenient as far as that goes. This is an image of a bird. Sort of shows the limitations. I mean, you can see that there's not a lot of detail in the bird here because it does take up such a small percentage of the image. So with, a 200 millimeter equivalent and an 8 megapixel sensor, you are going to be limited as far as being able to go out and take pictures of birds that are further away. Now this one is much nicer because it's much closer, and you can see that. This is one of the places where the camera annoyed me with what it was doing as far as the focusing goes. I had the focus box right on the moon, and it decides to focus on the trees, when really what I wanted was for it to focus on the moon and to have the trees more blurred. And this is where it sort of becomes a negative with the tiny LCD screen. I didn't try to zoom in to see what was here. Otherwise, I would have retaken this image and tried to use the manual focus. Same thing here. This was supposed to be the moon and an airplane jet trail. I have no idea where this focused. Obviously, it's not out at infinity where it should have been. And you can see on this one, this is one of the first times I've noticed it, you can see the vignetting here on the corners. Let me pull this down, see what my settings were. F4. So if you're at F4, it looks like you're going to get some dark vignetting around the edges. What was my zoom at? 43.2 millimeters. That's almost all the way out. I think 50.7 is all the way. And then this one, the last image I took, this is the cactus. Zoomed all the way in, didn't want to do that. And then you've got the flower here. I don't like that this part is out of focus. I would have rather this been in focus, but it looks like the focus is about right here. And that is sort of a limitation because of where I'm able to move the focus box. I can't move the focus point that far down on the frame. But either way, as far as the images go, I think these are very nice images for a 17-year-old camera that it was not the full top of the line. I mean, it was the top of the line Powershot, but that's not really meant to compete with your top of the line DSLRs and that sort of thing. So I really like the images that this camera puts out, and I think they're top quality. Now the video, again, another matter entirely. The video is, really bad. But as far as the camera images go, what I think you're going to get it for, you're not getting it for video, you're getting it for photos. I think the photos are very good, and I think even now they hold up very well. And with that, I hope you'll hang around, take a look at the images that I'm going to show here at the end. And once those are over, I thank you for watching, and I'll see you again next time.